Welcome. This is the third and final part of a conversation with leaders at the National Alliance to End Homelessness, where we talk about the future of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in homeless response. Check out the links in the descriptions to parts 1 and 2 of this conversation, and subscribe for a new video every week. Let's get started. So, homeless response providers, whether they're working in a city or a suburb or a rural place, have certain outcomes that they measure. They're trying to have fewer people experience homelessness, have the time those people spend homeless be briefer, and have fewer of those people return to homelessness once they're housed. How do DEIA initiatives help homeless providers and systems meet those quantitative goals?
I mean, ideally, what communities will do is make sure that they understand the inequities that exist in their response to homelessness. You just said it, the goal. So the universal goal is for everyone who is experiencing homelessness to not be homeless anymore. Um, if communities take that universal goal and then analyze how different groups are currently performing in relation to that overall goal, they have an opportunity to customize strategies so that everyone can be moved closer to the universal goal, regardless of what subpopulation they might identify with. And, implementing these sort of strategies really takes into consideration what barriers the groups might have, what lack of support they experience, and what ultimately is hampering them from achieving that universal goal of no longer being homeless. Again, not something that's controversial, but just recognizing the nuance that each individual, each group brings into their experiencing homelessness.
Yeah, and I would just briefly add, I think it allows for communities to go deeper into their data and ask the real questions. People aren't born or don't just wake up one day and experience homelessness. It is usually a series of events, and a lot of times it's specifically as we talk about certain subpopulations, it's systemic, right? And so if we want to have strategies that meet the needs of each individual people we serve, we have to really understand where we're missing the mark with the services that we're providing to reach those system performance measures that you mentioned, Rachel. And if we do not do that, then we'll do one approach, and maybe we'll have one outcome, but we won't know why the outcome isn't getting better, why we're not able to improve, and also who are we harming while providing these colorblind approaches.
In your blog post, you lead with this action step, quote, "You must continue to ensure effective communication with individuals with disabilities, serve people with disabilities in all your services, programs, and activities, and provide reasonable accommodation," close quote. What is the danger for people with disabilities if DEIA efforts are scaled back?
There's a lot of danger. People with disabilities can often experience chronic patterns of homelessness, meaning, they not only have to manage with disability and any relevant or related conditions and symptoms, but they also tend to be homeless outdoors or in emergency shelters for much longer periods. And homelessness is a stressful, often traumatic event in a person's life. And of course, stress impacts your physical and mental health. So there's that. But also being able to access systems is really, really important. And oftentimes people with disabilities have challenges with accessing systems. The other piece I think that made it really important to lean into that in the blog was when we talk about equity in conversation, it often turns into sort of a black and white binary. And equity is so much more than race and ethnicity, although it is incredibly, incredibly important to lead with race very explicitly. We don't want to do that exclusively because that can contribute to sort of a phenomenon called othering. And there are far more groups that also experience inequities, one of which is people with disabilities. But you also, when you layer race on top of disability, that compounds disparities, not just in our system, but in other systems. So I think it is important for us to name that and expand. I'm glad we have an opportunity to expand a little bit on this blog, but also to highlight the fact that race plus other categories often means compounding of disparate impacts in multiple systems. So if there was one thing that you take away from all that I just said about that, it is like increasing visibility around the types of disparities in our system, leading very explicitly with race, but also focusing on those other groups that have systemically been kind of blocked from having access to that economic, social, political power and representation based on who they are.
Also, as you mentioned, folks with disabilities, have face greater barriers to housing services and support, which could get worse, right? If we do scale some of these back. So we think about how we our communication barriers that happen within the homeless response system. There might be a reduced in accessibility within our programs are designed, and how people can access our interventions. It could lead to exclusion from services because they don't meet the needs of folks with disabilities. Worsen health and safety risk, right? Because as MFK mentioned, that folks will end up experiencing unsheltered homelessness, which also can lead to more higher risk of experiencing chronic homelessness, as we know that negatively impacts mental, physical health, and leads to earlier deaths than their counterparts who are not disabled.
So the administration is proactively scaling back DEIA efforts. And in your blog post, you say that organizations shouldn't comply in advance. What do you mean by that? And what is the danger of complying in advance?
So I'm going to preface this by saying Josh and we're not lawyers, so we can't provide any legal advice. But I think one of the reasons why we decided to write this blog is because of the conversations that have been happening in our field about what people should do. So, Josh has been a service provider before. I've been a service provider. I've also been a system leader. And I really had to think about like what I would do if I were in the position, because like, if I'm being honest, we come from a position of privilege because we are not impacted. We do not receive federal funding as an organization. So people are in a position where they are faced with, I think, over 70 or 80 executive actions in less than 80 days. So we're almost at an average of one executive action a day, and it's hard to keep up with. And executive orders signal priorities, they signal policy changes potentially. But there are still laws in place, and we wanted to remind people of this. Like, there are still legal responsibilities that we have for our systems, some of which are outlined in the blog that Josh and I wrote, specifically related to fair housing, specifically related to the Civil Rights Act, and of course the Americans with Disabilities Act. So when we say, hey, don't comply in advance, we want to just balance the conversation a little bit more to talk about some of the things that communities are legally obligated to do, still laws that stand, that have influenced and shaped some of what could be considered DEIA efforts. And then also, I just mentioned this, but the sheer volume of executive actions coming out can lead to confusion. So it's really important to take the time to process what is and what is not. And of course, consult with, leadership, but also consult with legal counsel as people are charting their paths forward before saying like, hey, I'm going to scrub our website or I'm going to dismantle this committee. Because, there are different interpretations, specifically different legal interpretations about the ability to kind of wipe out all anti-DEIA efforts.
One last question for today. Another action step that you recommend in the blog post is make decisions with transparency and accountability and ensure that decisions and efforts align with community needs and values. Why is that important, and how can providers and system leaders tell whether they're aligned with their community's values?
I think transparent and accountable decision making ensures that the homeless response system, is effective, and is also trusted by the communities that they serve. Without it, decisions are made in ways that reinforce inequities, exclude the voices of folks most who are impacted, and fail to respond or address the actual community needs. So if we do this, um, we can prevent unintentional harm. We can build trust and engagement, and we can improve the overall effectiveness of the work we're doing. So you ask, how do we know if we're doing this right? So I'm going to list off some things for to I'm going to list off some things that if you are doing, then you are leading with transparency and accountability. So that's engaging people with lived and living experience. And that's a regular engagement, right? And also while we're compensating folks for their time, facilitating inclusive community conversations. That could be like focus groups, listening sessions, surveys, and ensuring that the people we reach out to are diverse, right? We're talking about Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQIA2S plus, youth, young young adults, families, people who from all walks of life. We want to make sure we're hearing voices of all folks who represent our community. That will help inform what we're working. Uh, that will help inform who we're listening to and how we're developing these policies and these interventions. Use data to identify disparities and needs, right? We talked about disaggregating data, really looking at displaying and utilizing equity-driven performance metrics, right? It's not about how we're doing as a total, how are we meeting everyone's needs in our community? As Mary Frances mentioned, it's not just about Black and white. There's a lot of other subpopulations and identities that we want to ensure we're meeting the needs for, and also being able to use intersectional data to really tell stories, right? We want to be transparent about decision making. There should never be a doubt or thought of why and how decisions are made. Right? We want to make sure that it's clear, it's outlined, it's allows for public feedback. We want to make sure that we're regularly publishing reports and holding Q&A to ensure that everyone's aware of how we're decision making and people have thoughts or questions about decisions, how decisions are implemented. And then also, like, I think once we do this, it's not going to come to a place where we're like, we've done it, we've completed the transparency and accountability. Where we check where we can move on. It's a continuous process. So you have to regularly assess and adjust to ensure that we're continuously evaluating and adapting our services to better meet the needs of all the individuals we serve. By really having those things in place, and ensuring that you are putting those things in place, will ensure transparency, accountability, reflects what the community needs and wants, right?
And then just really quickly, I would say this. This is like, we are not coming from a place of judgment at all with the blog. We know the incredible stress that communities and leaders are under in these moments that are happening in 24-hour cycles sometimes. This is just our take on what we might do. And we hope that it's really helpful for communities to take into consideration. But we are absolutely not judging any of the decisions that folks are having to make in real time, because they know the risks that they face best. It's not us. It's going to be them. And we're on the sidelines rooting for everyone.
And we hope that we can support in all the ways. If you'd like to learn more about homeless response and about the National Alliance to End Homelessness, check us out at endhomelessness.org. If you're a homeless response provider or you work with people experiencing homelessness, please check out our training and development resources at learning.endhomelessness.org. And thank you so much, Mary Frances and Josh. This was awesome.